Even the most compassionate directors in Hollywood have their limits. Ron Howard has long been hailed by the industry as the epitome of quiet authority, charity, and patience. His reputation for composed professionalism appears to be virtually unaffected by the tumult that characterizes the entertainment industry. Beneath the familiar, comforting smile and the kind demeanor, however, is a more nuanced truth. Even the most compassionate person can have periods in a career as lengthy and significant as Howard's, when self-preservation takes precedence over tolerance. These internal struggles that developed the director's worldview and reinforced his conviction that respect, discipline, and consistency are not optional characteristics, but rather necessary foundations for any creative activity, are revealed in these moments, which are frequently hidden from public view. Ron Howard's career in Hollywood started long before he ever worked in front of a camera. He saw early on that the warmth portrayed on film did not often correspond with the dynamic behind it, having grown up as a red-haired kid on The Andy Griffith Show. In the decades that followed, Howard developed a style that prioritized harmony over turmoil and professionalism over ego, as he went from being a well-liked actor to one of the most reliable directors of his generation. His sets gained a reputation as safe, guiding, and listening spaces for performers. However, the sector is replete of individuals whose intensity, volatility, or unbridled power can undermine even the most harmonious setting. The 7 performers whose tales shape this story did more than just try Howard's endurance. They made him reevaluate his values, hone his leadership skills, and face the unsettling reality that unbridled kindness has the power to ruin a whole production. These weren't little miscommunications or short-lived creative disputes that were cleared up by morning. These were significant disputes between creative vision, authority, and temperament that persisted long after the last take and affected Howard's casting decisions for years. Today, we delve into the untold tale of those interactions. These experiences, which range from early disillusionment to erratic co-stars and legendary figures who manipulated entire projects to suit their wishes, highlight the seldom talked-about difficulties of managing talent in a field that frequently favors the most vocal person. We see how the man regarded as Hollywood's kindest director came to understand the difficult limitations that would ultimately define his reputation through these unspoken struggles. Ron Howard's early career experiences exposed a fact that will accompany him for the rest of his career. On television, the most serene settings can hide storms that young actors need to learn to carefully traverse. For Howard, the first storm came during childhood, when most kids are still developing their ability to make sense of the world, rather than as an adult. His appearance on The Andy Griffith Show gave the world the impression that he was a good-natured child from a little town who lived in a television family that was ideal. Behind that facade, however, was a more complex classroom where he learned about temperament, authority, and emotional instability long before he had the words to describe them. At first, Andy Griffith, who was regarded as Mayberry's moral core, greeted Howard with kindness and support. Howard's recollections from later decades claim that Griffith treated him as a partner rather than a prop, giving the young actor a sense of worth in a difficult adult setting. For a while, this mentorship influenced Howard's conviction that the cornerstone of every creative partnership should be respect. However, the dynamic changed as the program went on and Griffith faced more demands. According to biographers, Griffith's growing anger and the pressure of running a hugely popular television show caused tense times that the people closest to the production could not ignore. According to cast members, Griffith became much more reactive to difficulties or perceived disturbances, less patient and more dominating. Inquiring about character or plot direction occasionally elicited responses from the guy portraying his father figure that Howard had never witnessed before, as he had grown older and more assured of his artistic inquiry. This disconnection broke Mayberry's fantasy and made him see that kindness could be overshadowed by authority when it is stressed. When he started directing, the experience had a slight but lasting impact on the kind of leadership he decided to use. Years later, Howard faced a completely different kind of obstacle in 1996 while working on the high-stakes thriller Ransom. Tom Sizemore was a performer whose presence on screen carried a natural weight, and he was an actor of extraordinary passion. Off-screen, however, the instability that had already influenced a large portion of his public image became a daily challenge. Sizemore's appearances were erratic. His intensity fluctuated quickly from one moment to the next, causing an unsteady vibe to permeate the concert. Not because of lost lines, but rather because his unpredictable rhythm caused the emotional rhythm of entire sequences to break. Crew members remembered retakes piling up. Even Howard, whose settings were renowned for their serene organization, had to rearrange whole days around a single show. He later acknowledged, in a rare admission, that there were times when he had to rearrange the entire production to fit the energy of a single person. His preferred method, which was based on planning, clarity, and common discipline, stood in stark contrast to this. His lesson from Ransom was not one of rage, but rather the understanding that one unstable factor might destroy the trust necessary for creative endeavors. Howard's silence, following Sizemore's death years later, was a confirmation that some partnerships result in unresolved estrangement rather than a condemnation. The next crucial obstacle came much earlier in Howard's directorial career, when he was still figuring out how to exercise control without sacrificing the teamwork he cherished. Howard took advantage of his first significant studio directorial opportunity in 1982 with the movie Night Shift. He was enthusiastic, determined, and dedicated to creating a space where professionalism and spontaneity could coexist when he started the project. Within that framework, Michael Keaton flourished, utilizing improvisation to infuse the movie with vitality and unpredictable elements. Shelley Long took a different approach to the piece. Her attention to detail and precise planning were unshakable. She demanded to analyze almost every scene before letting the cameras roll, questioned blocking, and objected to unplanned moments. Howard was torn between two legitimate but fundamentally opposed artistic ideas. Crew workers remembered Long's conversations turning into drawn-out arguments that occasionally caused hours-long delays in production. Howard didn't speak louder or make a show of control. Rather, he made an effort to manage the conflicting demands, modifying his strategies in real time to maintain the harmony he felt was crucial. Years later, he referred to these encounters as instructive, recognizing that certain artists come with predetermined interpretations that make exploration all but impossible. He learned from Night Shift that excessive creative control can stifle the spontaneity necessary for filmmaking. Howard's conception of combat was shaped by these early experiences. They showed him that emotional stability, temperament, and preparation are just as important to filmmaking as skill. They also showed that the complex interplay between personality and process, rather than ego alone, is the source of all difficulties. These initial lessons weren't failures for Howard. They were the start of a leadership philosophy characterized by boundaries, sensitivity, and a deep regard for the art. Ron Howard faced increasing emotional and technical demands as his career progressed into bigger, more ambitious movies. By the early 2000s, Howard had established himself as one of the most dependable directors in the business, renowned for his methodical, steady direction of big-budget studio productions. However, because of the size of these projects, he would also come across artists whose passion and individuality shaped settings that were unlike anything he had ever overseen. These encounters forced him to face the conflict between his artistic ambitions and his professional limitations, demonstrating how even a skilled filmmaker may have to negotiate uncharted territory. One of the most obvious examples of this reality was the work on A Beautiful Mind with Russell Crowe. Already a well-known actor for his unadulterated dedication, Crowe treated each part as a psychological investigation. His method required complete immersion, frequently making it difficult to distinguish between personal identity and performance. He brought with him a laser-like focus that changed the entire production's tone when he walked onto Howard's set. People who worked with him said he came to work every day ready for a sort of internal conflict, not against his coworkers but against the filming process itself. He analyzed camera angles, questioned rewrites, and viewed every word from Howard as a call to go farther beyond the scene's emotional center. According to later insiders, Howard and Crowe's relationship was characterized by ongoing discussion rather than animosity. Howard thought that performers should be gently guided in order to foster an environment of trust. Crowe thought it was important to approach the material with unadulterated zeal, even if it caused friction. The end result was a production characterized by deep tension and amazing creativity. Assistant directors recalled Howard resolutely anchoring the set with cool determination rather than raising his voice. Although Crowe's intensity made the process much more challenging than the director had anticipated, his genius lifted the film. Without mentioning Crowe specifically, Howard's later reflection that dealing with some performers needed holding on rather than directing encapsulated the spirit of their partnership. The behind-the-scenes experience left Howard with the silent realization that some creative collaborations, no matter how good, are not intended to be repeated, even though A Beautiful Mind went on to win Best Picture and cement its position in cinematic history. Working with Russell Crowe presented difficulties due to conflicting methods, artistry, and passion. The difficulties Howard encountered with Marlon Brando originated from a very other source, one that was influenced by her age, her legacy, and her disdain for traditional filmmaking conventions. It appeared to be a career turning point when Howard was offered the chance to direct a film starring Brando in the middle of the 1990s. Brando was a titan of cinema, a performer whose influence on acting styles and on-screen persona had revolutionized a whole filmmaking age. But at this point in his life, Brando's perspective on the profession had changed significantly. He no longer viewed movies as group projects, but rather as vehicles for establishing his creative authority, independent of timetables, financial constraints, and the labor of others. According to witness accounts, Brando would arrive on set without knowing his lines, demanding that language be printed on cue cards that were in his line of sight, and pause sequences to demand new reasons or completely alternative interpretations. Instead of operating as a unified ecosystem, the set turned into an arena controlled by the whims of a single individual. Howard tried to keep everything in order by professionally and patiently changing course, but even the best-laid plans were thwarted by Brando's unpredictable behavior. On several days he vanished for hours at a time, which caused production to be delayed and left the crew and actors in a condition of worry. The crucial moment came during what ought to have been a straightforward conversation. Brando frequently interrupted, gave the order for instant rewrites, left the set for a long time, and came back with an entirely different idea for his role. Howard was forced to face the unsettling reality that even the most admired legends can undermine a project when discipline and respect are lost due to the request to restart filming from the beginning. In the end, these interruptions caused the output to collapse. Instead of openly criticizing Brando, Howard opted to uphold the diplomacy that had come to define his career. However, industry insiders realized the experience had made a lasting influence. The incident exposed the weakness of a director, even one with Howard's level of experience in a creative setting where inconsistency reigns supreme. It further strengthened his conviction that a lack of mutual respect cannot be made up for by talent. The world of performance had formerly been transformed by Brando's influence, but in this case, the lack of structure eclipsed the genius that characterized his formative years. The encounters with Crowe and Brando combined to expose Howard to two extremes: unbridled autonomy and intense emotion. The principles he had started learning decades before were given fresh depth by these experiences. They demonstrated to him how artistic brilliance may jeopardize a production's integrity if it is separated from discipline. More significantly, they reminded him that a director's duties go beyond directing performers. It also entails safeguarding the setting in which those performances take place. The lessons Ron Howard learned from past confrontations continued to influence his leadership style as he advanced in his directorial career. However, he was compelled to face the emotional center of his professional identity by two meetings in particular. These events did not take place in tumultuous sets or in productions that were in disarray. Rather, they arose from changing relationships with people he held in high regard, demonstrating that conflict can result from the fluctuating weight of celebrity itself as well as from erratic behavior or ego. The romance between Howard and Henry Winkler started amid the bright nostalgia of Happy Days, a program designed to capture coziness, humor, and a sense of home comfort. Howard joined the cast as the main character, the well-known American child next door, when the series debuted in 1974. He was easily recognizable due to his years as Opie, and his presence gave the program a feeling of security and continuity. At first, Winkler was supposed to play a supporting role as Arthur Fonzarelli, a rebellious counterpoint to Howard's polished image. But the leather-jacketed rebel elicited an unexpectedly strong reaction from the cultural milieu of the era. The show's axis changed along with the Fonz, who swiftly went from being a supporting character to a superstar. Sensing the momentum, producers and writers started reworking the episode structures to highlight Winkler's captivating personality. He was given increased prominence in promotional materials, and his recognizable mannerisms and streetwise appeal won his followers. Howard, who had hoped that Happy Days would serve as a springboard for a career as a director, was subtly eclipsed on a program that was first based on his character. Cast and crew members have reflected that personal hostility was not the source of the tension. Howard saw Winkler's potential and admired him. However, internal friction resulted from the unavoidable redistribution of attention. This kind of friction cannot be expressed without upsetting the delicate balance of group activity. Howard acknowledged years later that the encounter made him rethink his role in front of the camera. He saw that the story was changing all around him, leaving him as an important but peripheral character. The incident brought to light a reality he had known since he was a little boy. The entertainment industry has the ability to abruptly shift its focus, and even people at the center of a story might suddenly find themselves on the brink of it. Howard took the change as a sign rather than a challenge. Storytelling had always been his goal, and the dynamic on Happy Days gave him newfound motivation to try directing. One of the most significant turning points in his career was this subtle but intensely personal inflection point. Howard's work with Mel Gibson on Ransom demonstrated how celebrity power can subvert authority inside the filmmaking process itself, if the experience with Henry Winkler showed how fame may alter creative hierarchies. Gibson was at the top of his game by 1996, having just won Academy Awards for both directing and acting. His trust in his artistic sensibilities was evident, and his presence on any production carried a great deal of power. The collaboration seemed perfect when Howard agreed to direct Ransom. Both guys had a reputation for brilliance and were dedicated professionals with strong creative aspirations. But when the cameras started rolling, the dynamics became more nuanced. Gibson had a very hands-on approach to filmmaking. He discussed camera positioning, questioned screenplay decisions, and provided feedback on production elements that were normally outside the purview of an actor. He influenced everything from line delivery to logistical choices, crew members noted, frequently with the authority of someone used to ship steering. Despite his reputation for encouraging candid communication, Howard had to deal with a steady flow of recommendations, difficulties, and changes. In order to recognize Gibson's extraordinary talent and preserve the framework that kept the production together, his leadership needed to strike a careful balance between being attentive and tough. The tension was apparent, but the situation did not turn into a public dispute. Howard maintained his composure, although he used a great deal of effort to maintain the balance of his set. Colleagues said he was doing two jobs behind the scenes, directing the movie and balancing the impact of Gibson's influence. A notion that had been developing throughout his career was cemented by the experience. A director must protect the setting in which performances take place, in addition to directing the performances themselves. Even the most talented contributors may inadvertently throw off a production's flow if there are unclear boundaries. By the time Ransom was done, Howard had learned a lot. The conflict with Gibson resulted from the inevitable clash of two powerful creative energies rather than from malice or carelessness. However, the emotional toll served as a reminder that decisiveness and sensitivity are both necessary for leadership. Regardless of how well they appear on screen, certain collaborations require more effort than a productive workplace can provide. These interactions with Winkler and Gibson were the emotional pinnacle of Howard's protracted exploration of the difficulties of teamwork. The ethic that would characterize his subsequent years, guard the craft, protect the people, and preserve the process quo, was made clearer by these events taken together. The confidence that is necessary for narrative would be jeopardized by anything less. Over the course of his extraordinary career, Ron Howard carved out a path characterized by purposeful clarity rather than conflict. He was not made harder by the difficulties he faced, nor was the goodwill that audiences have long associated with his name diminished. Rather, they helped to develop a methodical comprehension of what it really meant to be in charge in a creative setting. Every encounter, from Happy Days' fluctuating dynamics to Ransom's emotional upheavals, demonstrated that a harmonic set is not produced by accident. It is developed by making thoughtful decisions, communicating politely, and being prepared to set limits, even when those limits conflict with the enormous impact of celebrities. Howard discovered that a production's biggest danger is not creative aspirations, but rather the breakdown of trust. Even the most gifted groups struggle in the absence of consistency, planning, and respect for one another. A reality he had known since infancy was confirmed by his encounters with erratic actors, strong personalities, and legends who viewed the process as incidental. Being professional is not a goal. It serves as the foundation for the growth of creativity. The integrity of the narrative and the crew's safety are at stake when that anchor deteriorates. In the years that followed these experiences, Howard's reputation as an empathetic and accurate director grew. His dedication to establishing secure, cooperative environments became a defining characteristic of his leadership. He was frequently referred to by colleagues as the calm core of any storm, a person who provided stability to incredibly large and intricate projects. However, the underlying idea of that constancy was acquired from experience. He learned the price of compromise and the importance of sticking to one's principles from the quiet disputes that took place behind closed doors. His generosity was unaffected by these lessons. They improved it by adding resilience, structure, and purpose. A more comprehensive analysis of the entertainment business as a whole is prompted by Howard's account. Although fame can magnify skill, it can also skew power dynamics and relationships. A film can be elevated by creative genius, but if it is not counterbalanced by discipline, it can also become unstable. The idea of the kind director who takes in all disruptions without objecting is a fantasy. In actuality, leaders who are prepared to defend the process with the same ferocity as they defend the art are necessary for sustained filmmaking. The question that remains is both straightforward and illuminating as we reflect on the 7 performers who pushed the boundaries of Hollywood's most patient director. Did these performers go beyond the standards of professionalism that are necessary in any collaborative setting, or were Howard's expectations too high? The response influences our understanding of these distinct tales, as well as our perception of the duties of people who lead the creative community. What are your thoughts? Join us for more unseen stories, hidden dynamics, and the nuanced truth behind the most renowned individuals in the entertainment world. Leave your opinions in the comments section below.